Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into something really fundamental in contract law. Consideration. And specifically, we're looking at this kind of tricky situation. Can something offered as totally free actually end up being a binding contract, maybe even worth millions? Yeah, it sounds weird, but think about it. If you give something away for no cost, you probably think you're off the hook legally, right? But what if giving it away actually saves you a ton of money or helps you dodge some big legal problem? That's what we're digging into with a really interesting case, Pensy Supply v. American Ash Recycling. We want to figure out when the law says free isn't really free, but actually a bargain.
Exactly. And the whole analysis, it really comes down to distinguishing a conditional gift from a true bargain for exchange. We'll be using that classic Holmesian idea. Reciprocal inducement. Basically, did the person making the offer, the promiser, do it specifically to get the other person the promise to do something detrimental? Or was that detriment just, something incidental you had to do to get the gift? It's the difference between someone being generous and someone cleverly trying to shift costs or liability.
Okay, got it. So let's lay the groundwork. Before we dive into the case and the whole bargaining aspect, what's the basic black letter law requirement for consideration? What does it actually mean for consideration to exist in a contract?
Right. Well, consideration is absolutely essential. Without it, you just have a promise, not an enforceable contract. Usually we talk about it as an exchange of legal value. So that means either there's some kind of benefit to the promiser, the one making the promise, or there's a detriment to the promisee, the one receiving the promise. Think giving something up, doing something you didn't have to. But here's the really crucial part, the non-negotiable bit. Whatever that benefit or detriment is, it must actually be bargained for. It has to be the reason, the price for the promise, the thing both sides are seeking in the exchange.
Okay, the agreed upon price, that makes sense. But it sets up the Pensy case perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because like you said, the price there was supposedly zero,
Yeah.
free. So this is where things get messy, where the real world bumps up against legal theory. Let's set the scene for Pensy Supply v. American Ash Recycling Corp. Right, let's analyze Pensy Supply v. American Ash Recycling Corp. using that structured approach. First off, what are the legally dispositive facts?
Okay, so Pensy Supply, they were a subcontractor on a paving project for a high school. The project specs said they could use this material, treated ash aggregate, called aggregate. And American Ash Recycling, they were the supplier, and they offered this aggregate to Pensy for, get this, no cost, totally free aggregate.
Free material for a big paving job. Sounds good so far.
Seems like it. Pensy took a huge amount, about 11,000 tons. But then, not long after, the pavement started cracking badly. So Pensy had to do all this remedial work, and during that, they found out the aggregate was actually classified by the DEP, the environmental agency, as hazardous waste.
Oh, wow. Hazardous waste.
Exactly. And dealing with it, removing it, disposing of it properly, ended up costing Pensy a fortune. Over $251,000 for the remedial work itself, plus another $133,000 just for the hazardous waste disposal. So yeah, over $384,000 total. Pensy then turned around and sued American Ash. Their claim was that American Ash didn't give them the aggregate out of kindness. They gave it away specifically to avoid paying their own massive disposal costs for this hazardous material.
So the free gift was actually a massive liability bomb.
Incredible. Okay, given those facts, what was the core legal issue the Superior Court had to decide about whether a contract was even formed?
The central issue was pretty stark. Was this agreement unenforceable because there was no consideration? In other words, was American Ash just giving away the aggregate as a conditional gift? Or, despite being labeled free, was it actually a bargain for exchange because American Ash got a really significant benefit out of the deal, namely avoiding those huge disposal costs?
Right. The trial court initially talks the case, said no contract. So what rule did the Superior Court use to look at it differently and decide if it was a bargain or just a gift? They went back to the classic formulation, the one by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. we mentioned earlier. It's the core test. The promise must induce the detriment, and the detriment must induce the promise. Reciprocal inducement. They also used a related idea, kind of an inference test from American jurisprudence. Second, it asks if the condition the promisee has to fulfill actually benefits the promiser. Is it fair to infer that the promiser requested that action as consideration, as the price?
Okay, that makes sense. The trial court seems stuck on needing proof the parties actually talked about disposal costs. What was the Superior Court's analysis?
Yeah.
How did they connect American Ash's alleged motive to this bargain for rule, even without explicit discussion?
Yeah, that's where the Superior Court's reasoning is really insightful. They said the trial court got it wrong by demanding proof of an explicit discussion about costs. The bargain theory doesn't actually require parties to sit down and haggle over the specific terms of consideration or even use the word consideration. What matters is the functional reality of the exchange. Pensie's complaint alleged, and at this stage allegations are taken as true, that American Ash provided the aggregate in an effort to have others dispose of the material and thereby avoid incurring the disposal costs itself.
So the allegation itself was key.
Absolutely. If that allegation is true, then American Ash's promise, giving the free aggregate, induced Pensie's detriment, taking on the material, the liability, and ultimately the disposal costs. And crucially, Pensie taking that detriment induced American Ash's promise, because doing so saved American Ash potentially thousands of dollars in disposal costs that they were legally obligated to pay. It was, as Holmes would put it, a reciprocal conventional inducement. The actions were functionally linked as an exchange, even if the parties didn't spell it out that way.
So the motive, the underlying why, creates the bargain, even if it's hidden. And the conclusion from the Superior Court.
The Superior Court reversed the trial court's dismissal. They concluded that Pensie's allegations were sufficient, if proven, to show that American Ash received a real, tangible benefit avoiding disposal costs that induced their promise to provide the aggregate. Therefore, consideration could exist. It wasn't just a gift. The case was sent back down for Pensie to actually prove those facts about American Ash's motives.
That's a fantastic illustration of how courts can look beyond the surface language. Okay, to really nail down this difference between a condition needed to get a gift versus something that's actually the price of a promise, let's use that classic tramp hypothetical. It always helps make things clear. All right, picture this. A generous person sees someone, a tramp, cold on the street. The person says, hey, if you walk around the corner of that clothing store, you can pick out an overcoat, put it on my tab. So the tramp walks around the corner, goes in, gets the coat. Is that walk around the corner consideration for the promise of the coat?
No, absolutely not. That's the classic example often cited from Williston on contracts and even mentioned in the Pensie case discussion. In that scenario, the tramp's walk is just a condition precedent to receiving the gift. It's something the tramp has to do to be able to collect the coat. It's not the price of the promise itself. Why? Because the benevolent person making the promise has, well, basically zero interest in whether the tramp walks around the corner or not. They don't benefit from the walk itself. It's just the delivery mechanism for the gift.
Right, the promiser gains nothing from the walk.
Exactly. And that's the crucial distinction compared to Pensie. In the tramp hypo, the promiser gets no real benefit. But in Pensie taking that 11,000 tons of aggregate wasn't just incidental. It directly benefited American Ash by relieving them of a very significant, very expensive legal obligation disposing of hazardous waste. That benefit transforms the condition, take this free stuff, into the actual price, the quid pro quo, take this disposal problem off my hands.
That makes the distinction crystal clear. It's not just about the promisee doing something. It's about whether the promiser wanted them to do that thing for the promiser's own benefit. It all comes back to motive. Okay, so we've seen the court look past free, analyze the motive, and distinguish conditions from consideration. What's the practical takeaway here? If someone listening encounters a potential consideration issue, maybe involving a gift, how should they break it down? Can you boil these rules down into like a step-by-step checklist for spotting the issue?
Definitely. Yeah, we can synthesize this into a kind of diagnostic tool. When you see a promise that looks maybe like a gift or has some condition attached, run it through these 4 steps. Step 1. Identify the promise and the alleged detriment or benefit. First, just figure out exactly what was promised. And what did the other party, the promisee, actually do or give up, or what obligation did they take on? Get specific.
Okay, define the potential exchange. Makes sense.
Step 2. Apply the bargain test, the Holmesian formula. Ask, did the promise induce the detriment? Meaning, did the promise cause the other person to act? NID, did the detriment induce the promise? Was the promiser making the promise because they wanted the promisee to take that action? Is there that reciprocal link? If not, if one side doesn't seem motivated by the other's action or promise, then yeah, stop there. It's probably just a gift, not a contract.
Check for that mutual inducement. Got it. What's next?
Step 3. Perform the motive-benefit check. This is the Pensie inference test. Look closely at the condition the promise had to meet. Did fulfilling that condition actually give the promiser a direct, tangible benefit? If the promiser clearly benefits like American Ash avoiding huge costs, then it's a really strong inference that the condition wasn't just incidental, it was likely requested as consideration. But if the condition seems primarily just to enable the promisee to receive the gift, like the tramp walking around the corner, then it's likely just a conditional gift and there's no consideration.
Okay, so focus on whether the promiser actually gained something from the promisee's action. And the last step.
Step 4. Conclusion. Based on that analysis, the reciprocal inducement check and the motive benefit check, you can conclude whether or not there's enough evidence of a bargain for exchange to form an enforceable contract. Always remember, the substance, the commercial reality, often matters more than just the label, like free.
That's an excellent framework.
Yeah.
Really practical. This whole deep dive really underscores how the law isn't always satisfied with surface appearances, is it? It digs into the why, the motive, and that can completely change the legal consequences, turning a supposed gift into a major liability.
Absolutely. And maybe that's the final thought to leave everyone with. Be careful with conditions attached to free offers. The instant a promiser puts a condition on something they're giving away, they introduce risk. If fulfilling that condition, no matter how small it seems, ends up saving the promiser time, money, or helps them avoid a legal obligation, well, a court might just decide that the promisee's action wasn't just a condition, it was the price. You always, always have to ask, why is this being offered for free? Because the answer to that question could be the difference between a simple act of generosity and a legally binding contract.